Folks, what I'm about to say, you might disagree with, but I would die on this hill, as the saying goes. I think it is easier to become a millionaire on a low salary. Now, of course, we have to define what low is. In this case, we'll call it 60K a year. But again, I think it's easier to become a millionaire on a low salary. So we're going to have to break this down, have the discussion. We're going to find out what side Dion is on this. But Dion, what do you think?
So I did a poll on my channel on video topics that people wanted to hear about, and this one won the poll. So here we are making the video. I've heard Josh Breet sing and from Minority Mindset and Graham Stephan and a couple of other channels do a video on how a janitor, or he was watching a car parking lot making $12 an hour, how he became a millionaire, decades investing in stocks. So is it possible? Yes. Is it easier? If people can eliminate that, we talked about it in a previous video, keeping up with the Joneses. Bigger house means nicer car, nicer neighborhood, expensive taxes. Bigger house needs nicer furniture. If you have the nice life, you need to take nice vacations and everything. So there's a reason why so many people making more than $150,000 a year are living paycheck to paycheck. A lot of people making $40,000 a year are living paycheck to paycheck. So I don't know that it's ever easy to become a millionaire, because it takes a certain type of discipline to go, okay, what am I doing with my disposable income? Am I understanding how small that is, and what can I do with it? So I would like to take me and say, how did I reach becoming a millionaire on what I call a low income? Now, for me, a low income in Washington State. So in your state, this might be a bigger income. So you might have to adjust this like regionally.
Sure.
$60,000 a year in Washington State is not a lot. I think that there's those charts where the map comes out and it says, this is the amount of money you need to make in each state. And I think Washington's 106,000 gives you basic living in Washington State. It's an expensive state to live in. So at $60,000 a year, I had been laid off from law enforcement. I started teaching at a CDL school, making $17 an hour. And this was in 2010, 2011. So it wasn't like in the 80s or 90s. I mean, there was people making $17 an hour then too. But it was a significant reduction in income. I had bad debt. I was a single parent with 3 kids. And it took about a decade. And I wouldn't know it if it wasn't for YouTube, because I wasn't tracking net worth for myself. I made a video on YouTube going, what happened first, millionaire or a million in debt? And I've mentioned that a few times. They both happened in the same day. But that decade, it didn't happen with stocks. And this is not a video, stocks versus real estate. My opinion, because I haven't mastered the asset of stocks, is if you have more money to invest and more decades for compound interest to do its thing, and for volatility to average out, stocks are a great asset class. I talk about Joe Kuhn all the time. He took like 27 years, retired at 54, solely on stocks, had the buckets method. So it's absolutely possible. Higher income, right? He was a process improvement for plant management, so he had a higher paying jobs. I didn't break 60,000 until after 8 years of investing, when I started making more money off rentals than I did at my job. The owners of the company said, well, that's not good, because we know how little Dion needs to live on. He'll just leave. So they started paying me more as a keep you around, and gave the golden handcuffs. But in those first years, I think the biggest thing that made it possible on a low income was the patience to understand how much those first 4 to 6 years were going to suck.
I think that is the key to all of this. And again, so if you want to really go back and look at some statistics, there's an oldie but a goodie called The Millionaire Next Door. One of my treasures is an autographed copy of that book. There's all kinds of charts and percentages, and teachers. I think teachers from memory were one of the biggest disciplines to become millionaires. And again, and also I lived in a world of the Silicon Valley, where if you make 106 grand a year, you're probably on welfare, right? It's that expensive here, for example. I worked directly with people that made, a couple $100 grand a year and couldn't survive a flat tire. And the reason I think it's easier is more income gives you more options. It also gives you more debt options. That's why I really do believe it's easier to become a millionaire on a low salary, 60, 75K, whatever it is, because you don't get those extra debt options, right? You make a couple $100,000 a year, your credit card balance, your credit card limit's probably 50 grand. You probably can get approved for 3 cars. Why not? Your buddies do. You probably got 2 homes. It's just all that extra debt that to your point, if you're not disciplined, gets you out. And the last thing, and again, this reason I believe this again, and I would die on this hill, is the game Cash Flow from Robert Kiyosaki, the board game. If you don't believe me, I will let you be the lawyer and I will be the policeman or the janitor or whoever is the lowest income. And I will beat you 90 out of 100 times. I played the game. I've done this exact thing with people. And not only will I beat you, but I'll beat you by hours. It's just everything costs more, right? Kids cost more. Houses cost more. And to me, again, it's that debt, right? We'll give you a platinum, gold-plated, bedazzled Visa card. It's just, you just have more options to do more stupid shit.
Almost an obligation to do more stupid stuff, right? If you're making a couple $100,000 a year, in your mind, you're like, okay, I have a successful income. Of course, I deserve a $10,000 cruise.
I deserve.
So making a low income will take the first couple of years. If you make $300,000 a year, and someone else makes $300,000 a year, and I make $60,000 a year, does it make sense to work overtime? Does your overtime compensation equate to enough more money for you to do it? For me, at $17 an hour, it did. Does it make sense to grow a side hustle if that side hustle only makes $300 to $500 a month? If you're making $300,000 a year, of course you're not going to spend time making $300 or $500 a month. It wouldn't have an impact. But to me, the mindset that comes from, I can do this side hustle, which was playing World of Warcraft and selling things online on eBay and then on websites that would buy the currency, to make a few $100s a month, doing a hobby that kept me with my kids doing the same hobby. I had the time to dedicate to it, the time to work the overtime. And then I lived in a high cost of living area. So house hacking had a huge impact. I think I was able to save more off my first house hack than I was saving monthly.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's why, again, it's easier on a low income, right? If you're making $300,000 a year as a doctor and you got all your doctor buddies, there's no chance in hell you're going to house hack. But you're making 60 grand or whatever it is a year and you house hack, you only need 3.5% down. You get a couple of buddies to live with you. You live for free, which, oh, by the way, other than taxes, and frankly, at 60 grand a year, even with taxes, is your biggest expense shelter. You win. You win.
My first house hack was a duplex. It was like 2013 or so when I got that. And I lived in it until 2020. 2020 is when I did my second house hack. So I did 7 years of house hacking a duplex. In those 7 years, I got demoted at my company into management, started making a little bit more money. $17 an hour with overtime was never anywhere close to $60,000. It was around 2018, 19, I started getting that $60,000. So the first 5 years there was more like 34,000, 38,000 on tax returns, right? Plus overtime, plus the side hustle. I had many times as I got demoted down to the president of the company, 2016, 17 or so, still wasn't making a lot of money. The owners of the company were very confused. They kept telling me, how come you don't want a pay raise? Like you keep giving pay raises because we were trying to retain people. I knew how much money we had to go. I didn't need to make more money at work. I had this weird fear of, I had several jobs in as a teenager where the managers were let go to save costs and somebody was promoted at a lower income. I didn't want to make a lot of money. So I'd be the one cut to go. So I was fighting that to the point where eventually they said, oh, we'll do a percentage of income around 2020. That's when I started making more money, right? So I held out for that in the long run. But many staff members were buying $700,000 houses. I was buying $300,000 duplexes. And I was asked many times, so you say the doctor isn't going to go around their doctor buddies saying, oh, of course I'm house hacking or whatever. I had staff members go, how come you don't have $1 million house? You have
Mm.
the resources and you have rentals and everything. Now you're the president of the company. You should live in $1 million house. And my answer was always a little facetious. I would say, well, I can totally go buy $1 million house because I haven't. Had I at any point bought the $1 million house, I couldn't
Yeah.
be buying rentals. I wouldn't be house hacking. I'd probably be working another, even with the increased income from 2020 to 22. And it wasn't like I went from 60 to 80. I went from 60,000 in 2018. I don't know what I made in 19, but in 2021, it was 200,000. Like it wasn't like 60 to 80. They realized, well, you're making so much off your rentals to even just try to keep you here. 200 in 2021, was on track to do 200 in 2022. And halfway through, I broke everybody's brain and said, hey, thanks for the raises. It's been great. Thanks for the $2 million in golden handcuffs. I'm retiring.
Yeah. I'm giving the 2 million back.
Yeah, just don't need it. And that breaks. There's so many, even Matt has gone, the lumberjack landlord, to make sure his name goes. Matt goes, $2 million in golden handcuffs. What do you mean you're walking away from that? And I was like, the LeBron quote, and I've used it many times. It's when you don't have enough, money is the only thing. When I was making less than 60, when I was making less than 40, and trying to get that first house hack, money was everything. Like every meal was, how do I meal plan this week? How do I not take a vacation? How do I get the old car to run a few more months? Like everything was so focused on money, so that in 2022, when people go, well, you have 200 and something $1,000 income, $2 million in golden handcuffs, money is just a thing once you have enough.
Yeah. But again, I think when you really break down the path to becoming a millionaire, I do think it's easier on a low income. It takes discipline no matter what. And to be clear, if you make a couple hundred grand a year and you are ridiculously disciplined, i.e. Dion or Cody or any of these other people we know, Millennial Mike, who just live on very little, you're going to win because you just have that bigger spread. But human condition, my personal life experience, my network of people while I was working, they all made, multiple six figures. Most of them couldn't survive a $10,000 emergency on something. And the reason they're not, can you imagine making 300 grand a year for a decade and not being a millionaire? I mean, that breaks my brain. And I know dozens of people that's true for, because they let the I deserve, they let the black card, diamond encrusted $100,000 credit card go to their head. They got a lot of stuff. They've got a lot of nice stuff, but they're not millionaires.
So you've gone to several high schools and taught, presentations on financial literacy. And one of the things that I love that I'm stealing from you and giving you credit is how you explain to high schoolers that at the age of 18, they're probably closer to financial freedom that they might be at any point in their life.
Absolutely.
Because, and I'll use myself, we're going again with the example of millionaire on a low income. My net worth, because I did a video, is the only reason I know this, on January 6th, 2020, when I closed on my fourplex. So up until 2020, I had not made six figures from my job, right? Not done it. And I closed on the fourplex, and net worth passed $1 million and debt passed $1 million, meaning that I had a gross net worth of about 2.6 million. If I paid off the debt and I paid the capital gains, depreciation recapture, and agent fees, I'd have about $1 million left. So $1 million net worth happened on that low income, because to get to that point, I had not made much from my work. But here's the levers I could pull that weren't a high salary. I can house hack. So I took $1,500 a month for paying for an apartment down to $300, increasing saving rate to invest by $1,200 a month.
On a percentage basis, that's a crazy increase.
Right. When you're making $17 an hour, that's a huge amount. So house hacking was huge. 2 years later, so 4 years in, I buy a cash flowing duplex. Right now, and originally I had moved from my house into an apartment, rented the house out. First year I lost money. Second year, I made a little bit of money, but about that fourth year, it was actually cash flowing. I had my first Section 8 tenant in there. Section 8 had some pretty big increases. I didn't have much of a mortgage. I think at that point, rent was probably $1,900. Mortgage was like $1,088. So I mean, there was a pretty good rental at that point. It didn't start that way. Like I said, first year I lost money. That's the thing that sucks. First years are going to suck. We're going to make all of those mistakes. 4 years in, I had the house cash flowing. I had the cash flow from the duplex. It was the next duplex, so about 2016, where I had 7 rental units. And this is why I think being a millionaire, I don't know if it's easier on low income or high income, I just know it's possible on both, is when I was a police officer, I was able to support myself and raise my 3 kids. My take-home pay in my area that I lived was about $1,300 every 2 weeks. So I was making $2,600 take home per month. With my 7 units at about year 6, my cash flow, and this is after setting aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy, so I'm building the reserves and paying the mortgages, was about $2,700. So the take home after 6 years of investing was more than I was making as a police officer, which was more than I was making at my job after getting laid off. So I had it wasn't financial freedom, right? This is something that I'll quote David Green on. He said, if you need $5,000 a month to live and you get $5,000 a month in cash flow, you don't retire.
Correct.
One
Agreed,
eviction,
100%.
one pandemic, one whatever. So I totally agree with him. But if you need 5,000 and you get 20, now we're talking retirement. So at that point, I was not able, after 6 years of investing, to retire. I had gotten rid of the worst debt, probably had a little bad debt left. I had the cash flow that was more than I was making. Didn't have a buffer yet to retire, so I kept investing. At about that 10-year mark where I got the fourplex, I had a paid off property, cash flow at that point, I was well over $5,000 a month in 2020 with the little that I was living on or able to live on, and the kids moved out of the house. Retirement became possible in that era, and then I kept working until 2022, the higher income and everything. When I retired, I think net worth had close to tripled. A lot of that was because of what happened in the economic world. But that decade of discipline of going, I'm going to drive old cars. I'm going to not take vacations. I'm going to not have all the streaming services, had to be there on the low income. I think it has to be there on the high income. You and Olivia did that.
Oh, yeah.
You looked at your stuff and you didn't go house hack, but you said, how do we take our 100% spending ratio and reduce that to 50?
Yeah, that's the only reason. And again, it's mathematically easier to become a millionaire if you make big money, but most of the people I've run into are not willing to whack their expenses 50% because they deserve this, or their neighbors would talk, or their friends and family would go, are you okay? Or whatever happens. Those things don't happen when you have a low income, right? You have your path to become a millionaire is very straight, right? House hack, as you've shown us. So certainly possible either way. I think a lot of people think the only way is to make big money. And I got to tell you, I know a lot of people who make big money. They have no shot at becoming millionaires. Just no shot. It's pretty crazy. Dion, where can people find you?
They can find me right here on YouTube, where I know people who have big salaries too, that make millions per year, who have very clearly told me how jealous they are of what I've done because they're still working for their money. You can find me right here on YouTube, Dion Talk Financial Freedom, where every Tuesday I do a live stream that lasts as long as the questions do. Today's topic for my live stream that is happening today at 4 or yesterday at 4, depending on when this video came out, it was on the language of money.
Tune in for that one, the language of money, folks. Thanks, buddy.